All right, everybody, welcome back to the second last event of the day. You've heard a lot about the industry, about getting into it, about specific houses and specific projects so far, but we're going to take a much wider overview at this point. 8 houses, all alike in dignity in fair Soho, where we lay our scene. You know, the Romeo and Juliet thing really doesn't work, but we have some of the most senior and distinguished people in the industry here today. We have Eamon Butler from Cinesite, Tim Webber from Framestore, Hector McLeod from Glassworks, Darren O'Kelly from The Mill, Mike Bithell from Bithell Games, Paul Franklin from Double Negative, Will Cohen from Milk VFX, and Richard Frank from Media Molecule. Do you think that the sort of the education sector, which is a huge umbrella term, I guess, but what is it doing enough to give you the people with the skills that you all need? And if not, what should it be doing that it isn't?
From my perspective, I think that is quite a sort of young industry as well, the VFX education industry, and I think that there's a danger of giving students over expectations for what they can actually achieve once they hit the market. I think that we quite often get some overconfident people coming to see us, and they're expecting quite a lot quite quickly. And I think part of what's been said here about the quality of what we do here is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process where you have to learn laboriously.
I agree. I think we often get people who are trained to be directors when what we need is a paint and roto artist. I think having said that, that was way more true 10 years ago. Things have improved drastically, but the visual effects industry, certainly in film, is becoming increasingly specialised, and to such a high degree that you need to be trained in your very particular specialisation, which is a very hard thing to do. And those specialisations are continually changing. So every time the education industry is trying to change and adapt to what is needed, actually what is needed has changed. So it's a hard thing.
And that kind of poses the question: what should education be doing, or what should it be concentrating on? I think when education tries to teach the craft that we're applying day in, day out in the industry, it struggles. Sometimes it's hard to keep pace with what's happening technology-wise. But when it teaches the fundamentals about what we're doing, about weight of animation, about character movement, about character development, the kind of fundamentals that are constant, that have been there since the beginning of filmmaking and will be there at the end, then it gets it right. When it gets too involved in how do you use a particular piece of technology, it frankly falls behind where industry is at. And actually, industry has a much bigger requirement, or much bigger responsibility to help educate students and graduates, in those areas. I think more often than not, when people start working in any of our companies, that's when the real learning about some of the live techniques and technology comes alive. Before that, it's really about getting a lot of those fundamentals right.
I think Darren's really touched on something. I recently went to Bradford for BAFTA to talk about visual effects to some fantastic students on a course there. And I was discussing with the tutors, they were asking what kind of things they should be being taught. And it's really difficult for somebody who works in the industry to dictate to education, because what is the purpose of an education? Is it vocational, or is it to get a degree? And I'm really not going to answer that for you. Should there be a module about Renaissance art as part of a visual effects course? Yes. Should there be? Yeah, without a doubt. Should there be a module about the history of visual effects in a visual effects course? Without a doubt. Going back to George Méliès and all that, from the dawn of filmmaking. So, what is the purpose of a degree? Someone's going to go £30,000 potentially into debt to get a degree. Is that just so that they can get a vocational training to land in one of our companies at the end of it? I'm not convinced that is the right angle for someone on a degree course.
I think a certain degree of the kind of that cockiness. I know when I first got my first job 8-9 years ago, I was that kid. I was the kid who was going to change the games industry as far as I was concerned. It took about 3 months to realise how wrong I was in that goal, and was pushed towards the kind of again that specialisation. However, the fact that I had that kind of grounding, I did a video game specific degree, and that interest in one day being the guy in charge. I think that was something I carried and something that guided the learning I did on the job. So I think a certain degree of arrogance in graduates and a certain hope for the future. I think we may want it a little bit too fast when we graduate, but I think that's just growing up to a certain extent, that you realize, okay, I'm going to get that one day. And I think that's really useful. What's interesting in games for us at the moment is we're having a bit of a problem in terms of what the education should be, because we're splitting very quickly into mega companies making, the big Call of Duties and Assassin's Creed, things like that, which do require specialization to a similar degree to what you guys are describing. But then you also have people at my end of the scale where we're maybe a 20, 30 person team making a game, and at that point everyone has to muck in and you have to do 5 people's jobs. So how we educate for that and how we tell students, choose an area of the industry that interests you and how to find a path through, that's something we're struggling with.
Well, this seems to be bringing up sort of 2 separate but different points to me, which, first of all, what should you be learning outside your technical skills? I mean, we had a speaker the other day who was talking about you should be life drawing, you should be engaging in photography. Are there things like that people should be doing? And then secondly, there's this question of specialism versus generalism. Where should people be aiming themselves, I guess?
I still think we have a bit of a problem at school level with the arts and the sciences, because if you take visual effects as an industry, it is a very great melting pot where art and maths, for example, will come together, physics comes into play. Just chatting to Paul about black holes, and you need a physics qualification to really look into how to produce that. And
or rather, you need people with physics qualifications. I am a fine art student.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's as important to learn things like social skills, like working in a team and not being precious about your work and all that kind of thing, which I've found that graduates sometimes, that's the hardest part for them to learn. It's not necessarily the technical stuff, which a lot of that you can learn on the job, but more the fact that you're going to have to be working in a very dynamic team where you need to be flexible and you need to be able to rise to challenges every day that can change. That kind of mindset is something that I think is just as important as the technical.
Well, it's also that thing where people aren't necessarily going to like what you do, and it's very objective, the business we're in, and it's a taste thing, it's an objective thing, it's everyone having their own opinion of something that is fundamentally quite obscure, and I think you brushed on it, but I think the personality side of it and the kind of the constitution and the ability to have the strength of character to be able to ride what is really quite difficult situations is absolutely vital. Probably not as vital as the creative side, but it's certainly getting close to it.
And it feeds into it as well. I think on your diversity point, I think that's just good for life generally, but also for professional practice is to consume everything. I always point out, in video games, we've all seen Aliens, and it shows in the games that we make. It's everyone's reproducing that corridor they really loved as a kid, and that's fine because luckily future generations also like Aliens. But what can really distance a game from that is if you have an interest in Renaissance architecture or Bauhaus graphic design or any other area, theatre, music, whatever, and you suddenly are the person who's doing something completely different that no one else has thought of because your world and life experience is different, and we should actively force ourselves into those kind of uncomfortable areas of learning, I think, throughout life, I think.